All right, guys. Thanks for dropping in. We're going to do a little Strong Roots Resources live on a Friday night. The date, in case we care, it's the 23rd. It's February. It feels like we're already halfway into spring 2024. I just kind of felt like I came in, sliding in sideways into my parking spot here by the cabin because I've had a great day out with some new friends helping do some garden bed prep. We'll talk more about that in a little while. But I I failed to pay attention as I was leaving, and I made the first two turns out of their part of the woods correctly, and then the third one I did not. And I was so deep in my thoughts that I got about 5 miles down the road, and I realized I was not where I needed to be. So I added a little unintentional time to my commute back home, but it was fine because I was working over a number of things in the back of my mind. So I call it productive. When you guys have a second, let me know if I'm coming through okay, because I'm not working with the world's best tech, but it seems to work for the most part. So it's been a busy week. It's been one of those where with the nice weather coming in, everybody's getting out. They're looking at their yard. They've been looking at Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest all winter long, and they're ready to do all the things. And sometimes they want some help doing the things. So there have been a few times this week where I literally was getting like back-to-back calls or back-to-back emails for consult work or new installations or just questions, troubleshooting things like that. So there's been a few minutes this week where I was like, whoa, guys, chill. It's February. So that's all good. I was just apparently we are now out of winter hibernation, and we just jumped right back into it full force. All right, thank you for the audio check there. So I'm gonna throw it up here while I'm thinking about it. Off grid and growing. These are some new friends of mine. We're doing some mutually beneficial things together, and they're about an hour and a half west of where I am. So well within a spot for a day trip to help them out with some things, and we'll get into what we did out at their place. But fine folks with a fine YouTube channel, so make sure you guys are following them as well. If you're into what I'm doing, you're going to appreciate what they're doing as well. They are also no nonsense, no BS, real time, real live. This is what it's like to build this kind of life. They just have much better video editing skills than I do because I have none. So let me get some announcements out here before I completely drop this off my radar. This coming Sunday, whatever day that is, 25th? Yes, the 25th, this Sunday, noon until about 3 o'clock. I'm holding one more wintertime foraging class out here on our farm in West Knox County. I've got about 8 people on the roster. We've got room for a couple of more if you would like. This time around, the weather is going to be nice. So if you guys wanted to come out last time but didn't feel like walking through the rain, I think we're going to have a nice day. And we're just going to kind of go through. I'm going to show you what some stuff looks like in dormancy so that you have got more ability to identify it year round. I'm going to point out some different trees. And just this is all, it's foraging, but there's a little bit of a land study aspect to it as well. So I teach what comes to mind and what is jumping out and catching my attention. So I'd be happy to have a couple more folks along for that. It's $20 per person, or if you got something groovy you'd like to barter with me, let me know. I could always use anything to do with foodscaping, edible gardening, small tools, seeds, you name it. I rarely say no. So if you're down to barter, just let me know. That's always cool with me. And a little further out, March 3rd, Sunday, March 3rd, we are having our quarterly gathering up here at the farm. We'll do, that's going to be from about noon to 4. We will have refreshments available. If the weather cooperates, we'll have a campfire. In other words, not too wet and not too windy. Otherwise, we'll do a tour early on. I'll show our no-till garden systems. we'll go visit the sheep, hang out with them, and tell you how we're using the sheep to improve the pasture. And then kind of the second half, we just have everybody gather around, have the ability to network and have conversations, do some bartering and swapping if they bring anything they'd like to do that with. And these have continued to be really well attended. The one in December had over 20 people. So I have not promoted that as heavily as I meant to because of the schedule blowing up. So feel free to share that with your friends if you'd like to come out. And you can get on the mailing list. Just get a hold of me, strongrootsresources@gmail.com, and I can give you guys directions. There's some place out there where the directions are already posted, but sometimes when things get shared, like on Facebook, some of that lower information gets cut off. So just holler at me if you need me. I'm going to go ahead and jump into this week's. We started this as This Week in Marketplace, but then I realized there's just too many opportunities to share similar stories that don't actually happen on Facebook Marketplace. And I've been toying with a title for it, and I think I have it. I think I have a keeper, and it's called This Week in Acai, because a younger version of Carrie would have flipped his lid over some of the stuff that has happened to be aggravating or unnerving. But nowadays, for the most part, it just makes me take a deep breath and learn to move on. But it still makes really good stories, so I'm going to tell some stories. So in This Week in Acai, we don't pay for a trash service here. So about once a month, I need to go take about 4 small garbage bags and some recycling over to what we call the Inconvenience Center, because it's not very convenient. But I'd rather do that than pay for a pickup service. And it actually just lets me. I have like a loop through the neighborhood that I do. So I have like stops that I do on the way. Like I do my monthly library stop, and I go to the spot where the gas is reliably most inexpensive, and fill up a couple big gas cans. So that's kind of like my once a month thing, going to the Inconvenience Center. And I wish people understood that there's kind of like this understanding when you go to a place like this, and that is you pull up beside the receptacle. So this particular center has all the recycling stuff, paper, plastic, cans, all that business, bulk waste containers where you can offload your beat up, nasty old dog chewed couch, and then just like regular bag trash. And it's big and it's roomy, and even when it's kind of busy, it's pretty in and out for the most part, even on like a Saturday morning. And I try to go on a weekday. So whatever day this was, it was sometime last week or earlier this week, where I was pulled in. There's almost nobody there, but there was one gentleman at the bulk bin, because I had some stuff to go in the bulk bin. Had offloaded whatever he had in the bed of his truck, and he was just standing there methodically, folding up his tarp, blocking the way, rolling up his ratchet straps and all that good stuff, patting everything down in his bed real nice. And that's not how this works. That's not how this works. And I have never been a patient person, and I'm trying to get better. I really am trying to get better. But there are times it's like I could have offloaded the crap I had on my trailer 3 times in the amount of time it took him to get the hell out of the way. But I'm too nice and too non-confrontational to get out and say, hey, move your ass. So that was this week's episode, or that I should say that's one segment of This Week in Acai. So he eventually went on the way. And I would like to just point out that this place is so roomy. What you do is you pull off to the side and then you fold up all your stuff, and you can make your ratchet straps as neat as you need them to be, but you don't make the rest of us wait while you fiddle fart with your gear. And then ran into almost the same thing, but in reverse a few days ago getting mulch. So it's the same thing. Mulch yard, very busy, great big trucks, little trucks like me, tiny trailers, but everybody's trying to get their stuff done, and nobody's time is more important than anybody else's. I don't care how much money you're making or how little you're making. But there was a guy who I'm gonna say, looking at the truck and looking at the trailer, is like a homeowner, and he came to like get his mulch, and he was just gonna take it home and do his thing. Big yard, plenty of room to get loaded and then pull up and tarp your stuff, which is what everybody else does. Everybody else pulls forward or pulls on up to the top of the yard and then covers their stuff, because around here it is uncool. Well, it's uncool anywhere, but around here you can actually get ticketed for taking off with an uncool load and brush or mulch or sand or who knows what just going everywhere. So, but no, he stays parked there, managing to block anybody from getting around him from either side, and carefully tarps his load, and then finally goes on his way. And I was just sitting there like, well, I mean, I guess I'll get to this job eventually. I'm glad it's not far. So I'm sure nobody listening to this is that boneheaded, but surprise, world doesn't revolve around you. We're all trying to get our stuff done. Please move along. Please. It's like Star Wars. Move along now. Now that I have broadened that particular segment, what I can capture for that particular segment, it could go long. So you guys just be watching for that. All right. Back on the homestead here. Been steadily pushing forward with, a variety of kind of small incremental projects to make things a little better out here. I've got more seeds started and yet more to go. Some of the flower seeds that I did with my friends Aaron and Stevie are actually starting to they're starting to sprout. We've got itty bitty seedlings coming up. So here's the part where I get nervous because I don't really have it heat controlled out there. So we just got to see that we don't get super cold again, or else I'm gonna have to like bring those trays inside and I guess slide them into the loft or something like that. So I think we're on a warming trend for the most part, at least while they're more kind of tender, and then we'll be okay. We've got some more people rolling in here. Kelvin and Stephanie, thank you guys for coming in. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so the seedlings are coming along great. I've got a few more started, and then I've picked up more seeds today, and it's just going to be, I'm going to have an afternoon set aside within the next week or so, and it's just going to be a seed starting extravaganza, which is kind of one of my very favorite things to do because I can just, it's very low stress and methodical, and I just sift compost from my compost pile, put it in the trays, poke the seeds in. I'm usually enjoying some podcast or something while I'm doing it, and it's one of my favorite things. I'm going to be starting seeds, not just for our garden, for 2 or 3 other people's gardens as well. So I'm going to kind of go a little crazy on it, and we'll see what happens. Room for error, room for failure, and that sort of thing too. I moved the sheep yesterday afternoon. They spent about 5 days in the hops yard. And because we had good, not just grasses, but different so-called weeds and things that sheep love to eat coming up. The dead nettle was coming up. The chickweed was coming up. Some of the fescue grasses were finally emerging, and I really wanted to get them out of their sacrificial lot. They had pretty much browsed everything that was accessible to them, including a bunch of stuff that my brother and I had cut down too. So I just kind of wanted them to just enjoy actual pasture for a few days. Of course, they still had their hay in there as well. But they really didn't eat much of the hay, and they grazed that spot really good to the point where it was time to move them yesterday. I'm not worried about that area recovering. That spot has no trouble growing grass. There's 2 swales that go through it, so it catches a lot of water, gets full sun, so all that stuff will be right back. I also didn't want a really heavy poop load in it because we want to hopefully put them back in one more time before we harvest the hops to let them continue to control the weeds. But I don't want to have them in so long that I could develop parasite issues. Um, we got one more person here. I didn't want to miss you there, Digger. Thank you for swinging in. Appreciate it. Um, so the sheep are now, we moved them a short distance down the driveway, and they are now below my food forest. So there's food forest, 1 acre pasture, 1/2 acre pasture, something like that. And then below that is what is eventually going to be another building site. And this is where the educational center is going to go. But right now it's 5 really big cedar trees and a whole bunch of privet and a whole bunch of winter creeper ivy. So I'm letting them work that over real good. It's also open and it's not overly brushy because I'm still waiting on more babies to arrive. So we've got about 4 that I don't know why they're still hanging on to them. I don't know when they were bred. They were bred before they came to me, but we should be having more babies anytime. And I kind of wanted them somewhere where they're still sort of not exactly in my zone 1, but pretty darn close as you could be to my zone 1. So I just like to be able to just kind of, I can pretty much walk out to the edge of my front yard and see them. So, or backyard or whatever we consider that part. But yeah, they're doing good. They behave themselves for the move. We just did the same thing again, like I've got up in that video from a few days ago. Just shake the food bucket. Everybody followed me. Primrose the donkey kind of took a detour and went and checked out something in the food forest. But after a couple of minutes, she was like, "Oh, hey, where'd everybody go?" And came down and joined all of us. So I'm getting more comfortable moving them without having to create an actual chute from more electric fencing, which saves me a ton of time in the moves. So I'm gonna let them stay there for a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of see. It's kind of the same thing. I don't want too much of a poop load at this point with the weather getting warmer, and I've pretty much got 2 more spots I can put them in that are kind of semi overgrown and brushy that they haven't been before. And I'm hoping by that time we will be able to actually be rotating on pasture. So I kind of keep using these sort of less than ideal areas to keep them in the winter time, because even if it gets kind of trampled and maybe even nothing up here is really going to get too muddy because of the topography. But these are areas that are otherwise kind of less than ideal for ruminants. Yet these sheep act so much like goats without the issues that goats can have. I mean, it's really remarkable. So they have been such prolific browsers. They've been so motivated to find new things to snack on. So I've just had to be sure that while we've had this kind of limited forage for them, they of course always have access to a roll of hay so they can get their complete nutritional requirements, and they're not forced to eat anything that may be bad for them, especially in too high of a quantity. That's kind of how that works. I have noticed in the plant propagation department that my Nanking cherry cuttings are starting to root. These were cuttings I took off of a job that was just cuttings from cleaning up on a job site. And I stuck a whole bunch of them in the soil back in November, I think it was, maybe even late October. And they're starting to bud and leaf out, which makes me hopeful that they have also rooted. Most of the time that's the case, especially after as long as they've been in the soil. I was hoping that putting all these softwood cuttings in soil over the wintertime would give them the opportunity to root while we're nice and cold and don't have to worry about. I don't really have to water stuff too much because we're so rainy out here this time of year. On the kind of like on my job schedule and consult schedule, I followed up with some folks who wanted kind of a pollinator garden, or more of so pollinator plants, friendly plants, native plants added to current gardens that they have. I was out there early last week, I believe, and met with them for a couple of hours. We came together and kind of came up with a bunch of plant selections that I know I could obtain here locally. Wrote up a really detailed summary for them with a bunch of photos, and they got back with me a couple of days ago. We made a couple of small adjustments, and they said, let's rock and roll. So I've kind of got that loosely on the schedule for the middle of March or whenever those plants become available. It's a small job, but I think it'll be really beautiful. They just wanted something that would be more appropriate for our climate and not some kind of exotic ornamentals that don't have the same kind of environmental needs. We continue to get hotter here. Our summers are hotter. Our summers are drier than I recall them being as a young person. So that's why I tell people, I was like, let's stick with stuff that is that can survive in somewhat adverse conditions. So we went with stuff that's kind of medium rooted, and their infrastructure that's already in place is good. So there's not a whole lot of amending to be done. It's pretty much plant stuff well and mulch again, and water through the spring and summer, and then they'll probably be good to go. So that's been confirmed, which was nice, because that's going to be probably 2 solid days of work for me. And then a kind of a larger, what I expect to be kind of an ongoing project on the consulting side with maybe a little bit of installation work for some food forest stuff took place yesterday. I went out to a site visit to some folks a little bit west of me, and they've got this really beautiful property, multi-acre property, where they have been offsite. The people who are moving back in there, they are kind of getting into retirement age, and they basically want help prioritizing and closing the loop on these systems. So the systems that have been running out there have been fairly conventional. At least they've not really been dealing with any pesticides or things like that. So we don't have that kind of damage to deal with. But they're wanting to learn about rotational grazing. They're wanting to learn about no-till systems. They're wanting to learn more about perennial systems. So it's kind of a bigger project. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved, multiple family members. So I did the initial site visit yesterday. I was there for over 3 hours. It took us a while. Took a ton of notes, and then over the next few days, I'll just start working on distilling these notes and kind of presenting a little bit of a plan to them, and we'll move forward from there. It's one of those projects that'll kind of be working over in the back of my mind quite a bit as I help them create kind of a new workflow and just create some solutions for there's a lot of inputs that come in. So we're going to get more, how do we produce our inputs here on the land? And that's going to help things. And they of course, they just want more food production because they would like to be, close to, at least like vegetable and fruit independent, and make some improvements with some meat production as well. Tomorrow, I think this is already full, but tomorrow I'm actually attending a class here, literally just down the road, for it's a creek bank repair workshop. And this is something that I felt was wise for me to sign up for, because it's not often that I actually go out and attend a class in person. But a lot of my customers and clients have streams that run through their properties. And I wanted to become more versed on how to help obviously keep the streams healthier, but help, stabilize creek banks so we're not eroding perfectly good soil into the creek, into the river, into the reservoir, and ultimately into the Gulf of Mexico. So for y'all who don't know, apparently the biggest export from the United States is topsoil from constant tillage, which of course this is mostly what happens on a large scale, on an industrial scale, but it all adds up. So if you've got soil escaping off your property, then that's, I don't mean to sound like an ass, but it's part of the problem. And I'm not exempt from that. We need to make improvements out here so that we don't have that, particularly with portions of the driveway. But one of the things that we can do is, if you have creek bank property, is to do a method called live staking. So off grid and growing. This is one of the reasons why I'm taking this class, is to help you guys too, because uh, while you guys are more in a wetland, which is that water is much slower, and because it is so spread out and that bottom land is so rich, you have a lot of kind of you have there a lot of it is slowed down, and because the beavers are down there too, that's actually kind of a good thing in your situation. The creeks that we have around here, I'm thinking of like Plum Creek, which is closest to me, Beaver Creek, and then all the, Third Creek, Second Creek, and all these creeks that run, closer to downtown Knoxville. At this point, there is so much shunting of water from roadways and from impermeable surfaces that they catch a lot of water really quick, and we've had really serious flooding problems. And of course, when you have flooding, you have creek bank and soil going with it. So I'm sure one of the methods we're going to be learning is called live staking. And this is where you take appropriate plants. So things like elderberry is one, various kinds of willows. You can do this. I wouldn't recommend this with bamboo. So don't do that because it can get out of control and it's not native to here at all. It can really take over an ecosystem. Unless it's one that doesn't put out runners. And I can't think right off the top of my head, I'm not sure which version is. I do think there's one version that is like a clumping variety and not a rhizome. But any rate, it's better to do things that are native to your region. And you pretty much just take cuttings and just jam them in the soil. Now, I'm sure there can be a lot more to it than that I'm going to learn in this class. And I'll fill you guys in at the end of next week about that. But this is something that's put on by, I think, some portion of the UT Ag Extension. So there's going to be a classroom portion, and then we're actually going to get out at the creek in our muck boots and do the work. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. I've got a real, affinity for our creeks around here. It's kind of my favorite place to be. I regret that the property that at one point would have been my and my brother's inheritance no longer is. So I have access to a creek at the bottom of where I live, but it's not technically in my family anymore. I don't think anybody's going to care if I go down there. In fact, I do go down there sometimes just because. But it's different when, anything can happen to it and there's nothing I can do about it. So let's do, let's take care of our creeks and keep those, keep the banks intact when at all possible. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that, creeks wind because the ground is irregular and water is going to follow the easiest and fastest route. So sometimes the stabilization is simply because there could be infrastructure nearby that could be damaged because, if the bank collapses. So just like on like an eroded hillside, just get some dang roots in there, get something in there that will help hold that soil down. All right, I got one more thing before we get into the main thing I did today. And I'm bringing this up because I think I want to know if my off-grid buddies here have this book, Vegetable Gardener's Guide to Permaculture. I have 2 copies of this book, and I want to get my other copy into the hands of somebody who could really use it. This is that's by Christopher Shine and Julie Thompson. Really good book. Lays things out very clearly. Is not unnecessarily complicated, which is that's the way to go for me. I don't need more complexity. I need less. And it will show you how to create ecosystems that are pretty much perennial based and works with just building your soil, planting, occupying all the layers, and it gets into stuff like it gets into honeybees, it gets into what kind of bugs control pest bugs. I mean, it's wonderful. It's full of diagrams, it's full of beautiful photos, and I guess it's got mushroom log information in here, edible weeds, and most of it is appropriate, and it's got a bunch of really nice diagrams. Most of this is fully applicable to the Southeast United States. There are a couple of things that are a little more tropical, so just kind of use your brain on that. You guys don't have that one. All right, well, it's yours. So next time we get together, I'm happy to pass it along to you because I know you guys will put it to work. It is actually one of those that when I'm working on something, and if I just suddenly pull a brain fart for whatever reason, that's one of the first ones I pull off my shelf to flip through and get myself lined back up again. Because sometimes my brain just feels like it falls out of my head. It's like, I know this information, but I simply cannot access it. So yeah. All right. So today I drove out to little community about an hour and a half west of us, and to basically help my buddies get their garden beds prepped. So for y'all who don't know, Sean and Jess over at the Off Grid and Growing channel, they are doing the off grid thing, and they are. I can imagine there have been times where you guys felt like you were really roughing it, but they are just, moving along at a steady pace, making improvements. It seems like you guys have been on the land for about 3 or 4 years, if I remember correctly. And so, main issue today, or not issue really, but main objective today was to tote the Jeep and the trailer out there and help them load up lots of compost from their neighbor a short distance down the road, who makes really high quality compost from his various animal manures, mostly horse manure in this case. And they're basically just taking horse manure, bedding, mixing it up, throwing it in a pile, and letting it cook down. It's as simple as that. Composting is not complicated, and the basic form of it is not complicated. So and they let it sit for about 3 years, and then his fine neighbor loaded us up on 3 different trips. I think we did a total of about 5 cubic yards of black gold compost, stuff that would sell for probably $65 or even $75 a yard in a market like mine. They got a wonderful deal on because they've got a good relationship with their neighbors, which is where it's at. We brought it back, did a little bit of quick bed prep, pull a few weeds out, and then just started loading it in. We took some video of that too, so I'll pop up on their channel soon after they get all that tied together. But it is that time of year. It is that time of year to be amending your garden beds. We are kind of past our really winter, deep winter rainy time. In all likelihood, crazy things happen. We've had a blizzard in March before, but I like to wait till about this time of year to start amending beds, because I feel like the nutrients are going to be most bioavailable for the plants that will go in a month or so. And early plants, and how we successively sow and things of that nature. And it's really, if you are going, this is a really good question that Sean asked me, and I'm not sure that I answered it super clearly at the time because I was starting to feel a little bit tired. But if you are an annual gardener and your beds are, you're planting things, you're harvesting. If you're harvesting, that means nutrients are coming out, so you need to put nutrients back in. So yes, it makes sense to amend annual garden beds. You can also still amend your perennial beds, your food forest, because it's the same thing. Like, this is the constant cycle. Nutrients are being taken up. That vegetable or fruit, that tree or whatever, is putting that into the food for you to consume or an animal to consume. And so that's where we close that loop, and we take that waste stream from our animals, or even ourselves if you're doing it right, and taking all those nutrients, letting them process in nature for an appropriate amount of time, and then applying them back to your beds. It's the most natural thing in the world. I think it's beautiful. One Step Closer has dropped in. Good evening, sir. It's good to see you. And so that's pretty much what we did. I was very happy with the quality of the compost out there. It was we've had rain, so it was heavy, and it was funny because it was like the last load was the heaviest, and my trailer was like, what the actual, after it was all said and done. And it was one of those things where I was like, we kind of tested the limits of the trailer, but we weren't going far, and we certainly weren't going fast. So I was okay with it. But I think I felt it have like a sigh of relief as we were pulling off those last shovelfuls, because that was heavy. I am sure that last load exceeded 2,000 pounds, no doubt. So, uh, but we got the beds looking really good and pretty. It's kind of that nice deep brown. Uh, just it's like, okay, it's time to plant. And really, this compost was so good. We were putting it on top of soil that they have already been amending for a little bit. But this compost is so good, like you could plant right in it. Uh, a lot of people will ask, like, how do I know if compost is good, or how do I know if topsoil or a planting mix is any good? And so you've got a few options here. The one thing that I do not recommend, if you have never used a company before, don't just have them bring you some random topsoil mix. That could be anything from stuff that has been composted down and processed and is quality, to something that just got scraped off a lot and is full of garbage and rocks and sticks. There's just no telling. So it's really good if you can go to the nursery or the mulch yard or wherever they have it and look at it yourself. It should not be really sandy, especially in our area. Clay soil plus sand equals concrete. So you should be able to grab a handful, mash it together between your palms, and it kind of form a ball. But it should also readily crumble apart again. That's what I look for when I'm using compost, or really any kind of soil amendment. That's the idea. Another thing you can do if you have concerns about contamination is you can ask to just take a sample, like, a shovelful worth really is all you need. Take it home, put it in some little planting cups, and park like some peas or some beans or some kind of legume in there. Like, do this inside where you can control moisture and temperature and all that kind of stuff. Put it on your windowsill, water them, and see how they do. If they sprout and then immediately yellow, we've got a problem. So know that before you spend hundreds of dollars on imported compost. One of the nice things about what we did out at Sean and Jess's place today is this stuff is being made a half a mile from their home. So it is essentially the same microbiome that they're operating within. It's not exact, but it's as close as you can get. So to my mind, that is preferable over something that has been imported and, bought from a bulk supplier and then, moved and moved and moved again. So really try to, especially if it's your first time buying from any particular supplier, just they should be willing to answer your questions. And I'm trying to investigate a place right now, but I just haven't been able to reach them. I'm trying to do this on behalf of a customer who's not on the end of the state I am in. So this is not a place that I have visited in terms of, looking at their products. So I went ahead and presented a couple of alternatives to her to follow up on while I work on getting a hold of these other people, because it's like I said, you don't know if they're getting it from just scraping off for site prep for a building, or if it's something that's actually been created, in other words, or they have blended a variety of materials. Sometimes sifted topsoil is great, and it's all you really need. There's nothing really wrong with that. I grew for years in a sifted topsoil mix with some goat compost thrown on top of it, and it was great. I have used things that have been called a planting mix, is a common term. So that's usually more, it's a little loamy. Sometimes it's got like some peat moss thrown in it. Peat moss is starting to be kind of endangered, and it is not something that easily, it regrows, but very, very slowly. And peat moss is one of the most common components of a potting soil. So I would like to tell people, even if you don't compost enough to make soil to add to your garden, compost enough, even use like a worm composting system, that you have your own potting soil, and you're not buying that, because it will retain water better. And while sprouts don't actually need a lot of sprouting seeds, don't need a ton of nutrient. really everything that seed needs is contained within the seed. So, but I use a compost mix to start seeds in because it retains water better than anything else that I've tried. Everything else, it just drains right through. Even when I water really gently and really slowly with like a pump, like a, a pressurized, kind of mister sprayer, the water's just gone in an hour. So I will use compost that I have made, and then when I take that plant when it's ready to go in the ground, it's sitting there in nutrient dense material, and then that nutrient dense material just goes right into the ground, because obviously we don't uproot the sprout from the soil. We work the pot and we put the whole thing in there. So to me, that's kind of like skipping a step. Like I'm kind of composting on transplant day. So that's kind of my take on that. Nutrient dense and soil that is alive and active with with a kind of all of the tiny microscopic creatures. They are bringing balance. Like everything that is underneath our feet is or should be alive at least. And as you amend more soil on top, Jess made a really good point with this. The soil beneath becomes more alive. So while you may have hard pan at first, over the years, as you add on top, it gets more and more diverse, better aerated, more living and complex deeper down. And that's why when you find, and it's rare to find, but you find places that if the soil has been cared for appropriately and not walked on, compacted, driven over, tilled, or anything like that, there are places where you can put your arm down to your shoulder into the soil. And to me, that's wild and hard to comprehend, because we're not there yet. And I don't know if we'll get there in my lifetime, but I'm starting the process at least. So I think that's amazing. So that is my spiel on put compost on your soil, for the love of God. Even if you just add carbon, even if you're just adding wood chips, you can get to the same point. It just takes a little longer by doing wood chips. Composting is just speeding the process of decomposition. That's all it is. And you can do it as actively, and you can nerd out as much on it as you want, or you can just pile stuff up somewhere and check it now and again. And when the underside starts to look like soil, it's ready to use. If it smells like soil, it's ready to use. And then there's biodigesters, and there's I forget the other name, but there's all kinds of systems you can build that will make stuff fast. And fast can be good, fast can certainly be useful, but ultimately just do it for real. One Step Closer says, I mix some of the soil from my garden beds into my starting mix. It gives them native microbes from the start. And that you can do that. You can absolutely do that. You're still closing the loop. It still works. And the bioreactor. Thank you. The bioreactors are really cool, but that's exactly the kind of thinking that we need more of, is what's happening on this land and how can I keep working with it and involve many aspects of it to achieve a goal. That's kind of one of the most basic principles of permaculture, of regenerative design. So, integrate, don't segregate, slow, small solutions. It's just the way to go. All right. Explain what you mean by closing the loop. I certainly can. Okay. So a closed loop system is when you are not having to import anything to amend. Let's just talk about a garden for the moment. Although you can apply this to livestock, you can apply it across multiple ways, but let's just talk about the garden. You are not having to bring anything in, and nothing is leaving. So a closed loop system is, I made my own compost from weeds that I pulled out of the garden and animal manure. And I add that compost in early spring to give a nutrient boost, and that produces food. I eat the food. And because of the system we have here, everything that comes out of me is also composted. That is a closed loop system. Nothing is being imported, nothing is being exported. I will say, in the case of doing composting with what comes out of the human body, I do not use that on anything annual, anything that is harvested off the ground. I pretty much just directly put that into pasture when the pasture is not being grazed. So just to make that clear, even though we do it appropriately and we don't, I think chances of contamination or whatever are incredibly low. But just for the sake of clarity, so if we're talking about even just your veggie trimmings, weeds, bedding, cardboard, anything organic. I think it's Jeff Lawton who says if it lived once, it can live again. So as long as it is not basically a petroleum byproduct, plastic, rubber, things like that, if it is a carbon byproduct, you can turn it back into soil. You guys let me know if that makes sense. You're not importing, you're not exporting. You're keeping everything on the land. So where for you guys off grid and growing, where we were pulling out all those weeds and throwing them in a pile, and those will become compost too. And you can just compost them right in place, right in that bed that we designated. That's you're closing the loop by doing that. Not closing the loop would be putting weeds in a garbage bag and taking it to the dump. That would be the craziest thing to do, but yet people do that. So yeah, so it's really a good, awesome. Okay. It's a really good idea to ask yourself before you do something that has to do with food production. I mean, you could go crazy and you could apply this to multiple aspects of your life, but when it comes to food production, ask yourself, am I closing the loop, or what steps do I need to take to do that? Because, like in your case today, yes, we went and imported from half a mile down the road from a very good neighbor in a mutually supportive, beneficial relationship, some compost. Totally fine. 100% fine. I still import some stuff. I'm not even saying that I'm there. But I don't export hardly anything at all. So that is one plus. So as long as you are asking yourself, hey, am I in a situation where I have to earn more money to buy the thing, to do the thing here, or can I just figure out how to do the thing here? So that's kind of my overarching goal with our land specifically, is that can I get all of my income eventually to take place off of this property so that I don't have to be off site quite as much. And I'm kind of incrementally working my way towards that point. All right, guys. Well, that is pretty much what I had on the agenda. The notes that were written on the passenger seat of the Jeep driving out to see you guys today. So I hope that was helpful for people. You guys know how to get a hold of me. If I can help you all with anything at all, I'm glad to do it. Just a reminder, meetings here, March 3rd. Holler at me if anybody would like to come out to that. Share it with people who you think would be a good fit. Just no dogs, just I'm sure you guys know that, but no dogs and no children that are going to cause a lawsuit. Children that can behave themselves or be leashed are fine. So otherwise, that's pretty much what I got. I am going to head on over to the cabin and enjoy some. I think Angel made a chuck roast stew. It smelled amazing when I came in. So I'm going to go devour some chow, and I appreciate you guys hanging out and for your time, and we will talk to you next time.